All right, good morning, everyone. We're here today for Bible study, and this morning we'll have the 19th chapter of the book of Matthew, and we'll review the 18th chapter as well. We have to discuss when we end Bible study because I'm going to be in surgery on the 7th. When do you want to?
We only have one more Wednesday before then. It's just whether or not you'd like to take that off.
I'd like to take that off.
Okay,
Yeah.
then we'll end it today.
This will be the last one then.
Yeah.
Till further
Would that be
notice.
okay with you?
Sure.
Sure.
All right, good. Excellent.
School's out.
Yeah.
School's out for
We
the
won't
summer.
make it preach from the bed, will we?
Well, I'll get to preach July 4th weekend.
Yeah.
All right. So, from last time, the 18th chapter of the book of Matthew, Jesus begins by taking a little child, putting it in the midst of the crowd, and he says, don't be a stumbling block to these little ones, right? And he asked the disciples to become like little children. And that has all sorts of different connotations. The child here, at the very beginning, is literally a child. He takes an actual child, and then he begins to use the child as a metaphor for newer disciples, for disciples. So those leaders should not be stumbling blocks to disciples. And he goes from there to saying, also get rid of stumbling blocks for yourself. The stumbling blocks that work on you. If your hand offends you, cut it off. If your eye offends you, plug it out. Pretty rough stuff. So he's getting rid of all the stumbling blocks, anything that might impede the correct preaching of the gospel to believers, and anyone who, any disciple who has things that distract them from the gospel themselves. All right, so it's to really allow you to focus on the gospel without any distractions whatsoever. There. Then he goes into the relationships of disciples to each other within the community, and that's the famous Matthew 18 that we talk about all the time. If a brother or sister sins against you, you go to them personally while you're alone, just you and them. That's the first step, and it's personal, okay? The second one, you bring two witnesses. And that adds a legalistic aspect to it. And as I mentioned last week, the trust is gone then. That's, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, once you lose step one, you fail at that, it's over already, as far as I'm concerned. Once you go legalistic to where you need somebody to back you, it means that you don't trust the other person you're talking to, and that's where you lose the whole thing, as far as I'm concerned. But at any rate, so 2 or 3 witnesses, and if he doesn't listen to you, then you take it to the church. That's public, kind of a public trial, with the possibility that the person is going to be expelled from the community. Let them be to you like a tax collector or a Gentile. All right? So there are steps that begins with the first step, where a person goes directly to the other person. And really, the hoped for result is that the first step works. Because everything else is okay. Even let's take a look at the second step, for example. You go with a couple witnesses, and the guy admits his sin and all that stuff. But has he admitted his sin because he has a relationship with you, or just because 2 other people are witnesses?
I think, Pastor, when you say the second step is just a matter of trust, I believe that you, and I know it's your own peccadillo and all that, I think you oversimplify it a little bit. I think there is the potential for the issue of intimidation. That cannot be ignored. We talked about that, Dory talked about it, boss versus.
Yeah.
There are cases where people are intimidated from taking their issue directly to someone, like a pastor. And so I just don't think you can ignore that. I don't think you can put it exclusively a lack of trust. I think the potential for intimidation is there.
Yeah, what he's referring to here isn't a sin that's happening between somebody who has more power than somebody else. It's a sin between equals.
In this case, yes.
In this case, yeah. But that can happen.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. But here he's talking about when your brother or sister.
Okay.
That's a
Then
term
it's
of equity.
almost exclusively a question of trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, you know, if you really think about it, and it doesn't work this way ever. If you really think about it, there should never be a power differential in the church that would intimidate somebody. But that's just not true, any more than it is in any other organization, right? People are afraid to challenge other people for fear of something, yeah. But this is, and that exists, and that may be help to serve as some kind of protection from that. But it also, well, I mean, there's a merit to that. We have that what's it called, the Mutual Ministry Committee, and that's, you know, I think it's sometimes overused, but I think it can be a place where something really bad has happened, some real harm has been done, that a person can confidentially discuss with somebody else, with that committee, and get some protection with regard to it, you know?
Right,
And say things that they wouldn't say to the other person's face.
yeah,
So you can do that. But in this case, he's talking about a brother or sister.
yeah, equals.
Equals.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But if they won't even talk to you, you know, there's a break in trust right there, if they won't even talk to you.
Well, do you sometimes feel intimidated even with a person who's your equal?
You know, I don't know if it's a case of intimidation, or I think I think a lot of people just do not like confrontation.
Yeah.
It's very unpleasant.
And a lot of people want to just be right.
Kind of gets into
Yeah.
kind of gets
It's about
into a
all kinds of
personality
different
trait.
things.
Some people are very outspoken and say what they mean. Don't feel
Some
things
are,
like that.
and some are, you
And other
know,
people are on the other
Yeah,
end.
you're right.
I mean, the slightest little affront, and they're just
Almost seems unfair, though, doesn't it?
timid.
That the person who is sinned against has to take the initiative.
mhm.
You know, it's like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. Now I got to, you know, endure this discomfort.
Go tell him you did something wrong.
Yeah.
And say, what do you mean I did something wrong? You're crazy.
But you're right, it
Bingo.
does.
Yeah. It does
That
almost.
person likes confrontation.
It does almost seem unfair.
If you do it not in a confrontational mode, but just say, can we get this behind us, but, you know,
Yeah.
and all of that, and they still won't.
Yeah.
There's no, some people just set their heels in and it's all about what I want, and it has to be that way if you want to get it behind you.
Yeah.
And if you try everything and they still don't, it's not about.
Some people are confrontational by nature.
Yeah.
Everything's an argument with them. And that's a sign of weakness. That's an insecurity
We insecurity apart.
on the part of the person who's confrontational, overly confrontational and argumentative. If you're always speaking in terms of argument, it's because there's a fear on your part that you'll be wrong. It's a sign of insecurity. Yeah, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm right. So don't challenge me on it. And then there's the other end of it. One of you said that some people will avoid any kind of conflict or confrontation at all costs.
There's your timid person.
Yeah, they are. And then some people are pretty good at discerning when it's time to endure the confrontation when it's necessary. That's a tough thing to do too. Yeah. All right. So anyways, so that's Matthew 18. Then he goes into, Peter says, how much should I forgive? And it's 70 times 7. Basically, it's infinite forgiveness. It's tough to do. But he concludes the chapter with saying that we are forgiven as we forgive. And blatantly says God will not forgive the unforgiving. Heavenly Father will also do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother or sister from your heart. Kind of rough. You have to be forgiving in order to be forgiven. And that means that forgiveness is conditional. Ooh.
Doesn't get any better in the next chapter either. It's tougher,
So we're going to lean on some grace here, huh? Right off the bat.
a lot of it.
Better have it.
Well, that's, that was part of Luther's dilemma. We're saved by grace. And, a couple of pastors at that time went completely overboard and fomented revolution and everything else. And I don't know that Luther ever forgave those guys, but he certainly didn't forget, He kicked him out of Wittenberg and everything else. But
Trying to chase him down and kill him.
yeah.
Pretty hard to.
Well, yeah, he was a pretty rough character. Luther,
I just finished that book. I'm going to bring it in here to the library, but if anybody, it's by Eric Metaxas.
Metaxas,
And he
yes.
writes it's preachy at times, but it's an important book to read about the life and time of Martin Luther. You probably
he used to throw...
No, the one I read was,
Yeah, there's several.
he, prominent biographer of Luther, going back probably in the 50s.
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about?
I read,
Yeah.
the first real good one I read was Here I Stand. I like that one a lot. That's what really got me interested in Lutheranism.
Yeah, I think that was the title of it.
Yeah, Here I Stand. Yeah, that's the penultimate, thing. Yeah. He was a pretty rough character, Luther. Well, when he starts talking, even if you read the Book of Concord, what you should do with children who will not learn their Bible lessons, or people who won't teach them, drive them out of town, don't feed them. I mean, yeah, pretty rough guy. Alrighty, Matthew 19, and we jump right into the deep end here. When Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. Large crowds followed him, and he cured them there. So he's got large crowds following him. Some Pharisees came to him and asked him, and to test him, and he asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause?" And he answered, "Have you not read that the one who made them in the beginning made them male and female?" And he said, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. The two shall become one flesh. So there are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." They said to him, "Why then did Moses command us to give a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her?" He said to them, "It was because you were so hard-hearted that Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for unchastity and marries another commits adultery." All right, there you go. Remember that divorce in the time of Jesus could be totally destructive to the woman. They would literally just give her a certificate of dismissal. Well, now she's got no support. She would have to go live with one of her brothers or her fathers if they would take her back. That really disgraced the woman.
This version says, "Who divorces his wife for any cause other than her unfaithfulness." What is the wording in yours the same?
Chastity. Unchastity.
This for her unfaithfulness. Boy, that's kind of a big gray area, it seems to me.
Well, I think he's referring to sexual infidelity.
Yeah.
It's also very one-sided.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything about man's infidelity, which isn't surprising
The
at
man
this
commits
time.
adultery if he marries another woman, if he marries
Yeah.
another woman, of course. But anyway,
Yeah, it's the woman's fault here, always,
It kind of lasted into the 50s.
And perhaps beyond.
And when it was the case then, as it might still be, that there was more infidelity committed by men than there ever was by women. Although now it's catching up, but now I think it's almost even, where the sexual mores are such that it's, it's different. Pretty hard line here. This is a contract with God, though. And there are tribal concerns, family concerns, violations of marital contracts could start wars. So there's a lot more at stake than just the relationship between the man and a woman here. Yeah. The other thing is, Jesus is a binary guy. There's no LGBTQ plus 1A, whatever. Yeah. There's none of that. He doesn't even.
Plus signs anybody else they can't think of right at the moment.
He doesn't know anything about any of that stuff.
That-
It's just not in his worldview. For Jews, and Jesus was a Jew, homosexual behavior or any other kind of deviant behavior was regarded as an abomination, a really bad sin. You don't even mention it. You'll find nowhere in the gospel where Jesus ever mentions homosexuality or any other that kind of stuff. When he talks about adultery, he's talking about it strictly in the heterosexual sense or in the general sense, being unfaithful to God. So that it's just not in the worldview at all. So any conclusions that you might make regarding his attitude toward today are totally your own assumptions. I got nothing, from here as to what he would do about any of that stuff. But, marriage for these people was bigger than them. Those relationships were bigger than them. It wasn't just one person and another falling in love. That wasn't really the way they thought. It was a contract between families. It was a social reality, not just a personal one.
Well, almost all marriages were arranged at that time.
Yes.
Okay, so,
Yes,
which definitely had a contract aspect to it.
sure. Yeah. And the concept of a private life as we know it might not have even existed in those days. They had what was called a dyadic personality, a community-oriented personality, where we have an individualistic. And it's very hard to map the social mores of this time and draw conclusions in our time, because marriage wasn't the same then as it is now. It simply was not the same. It wasn't the same deal at all. So Jesus would not be very. I can understand why a gay person struggles with the gospel and feels like he or she is not included in it, because they're not. That's the truth. They're not. They're not. He never mentioned it. Nobody ever asked him about it, because no one ever would. It was unmentionable. It just would have never happened. It's just not in his worldview. Not in his worldview there. All right. Now this is kind of funny because he makes an exception here. This is interesting. His disciples said to him, we're in verse 10, if such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry. But he said to them, not everyone can accept this teaching, but only those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others. There are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can. Okay. Eunuchs would neuter themselves sometimes, most of the time be neutered. So if they're working for somebody, they wouldn't be fraternizing with their women. And there were a few people who neutered themselves to relieve themselves of being tempted.
Kind of like a little more severe than picking your eye out.
Yeah. Well, remember that, except for it's a little lower in the anatomy, and
hierarchy that stands. It sounds like, but it's a curiosity here in that regard. He's talking about the divorce, better not to marry. Now he's gone from, here's another reason to not get married. To make yourself a eunuch. But doesn't that have to do with the procreation? Lack thereof? I mean.
Well, it has to do partially.
Rather than worrying about whether it's regarding a divorce or not, it's just a statement, well, you better do this than not marry.
I think it's it has to do with sexual temptation.
Okay.
To just totally eliminate any. Remember a community called Heaven's Gate? Remember those guys? Well, they all did that to themselves before they died, or not, or way before they died. Some of them, as a means of not having that as part of their life. They got themselves castrated.
Okay.
Well, so eunuchs who have been so from birth do not have sexual desire.
Okay, eunuch in this version has gotten rid of the word eunuch totally.
Oh,
Yeah,
what's it say?
it's, the teaching does not apply to everyone, only those to whom God has given it. For there are different reasons that men cannot marry. Some because they were born that way. Others because men made them that way.
Yeah.
So it loosens it up a little bit compared to yours, without a doubt, right or wrong.
Yeah, it provides a good loophole.
Uh-huh.
That's really not there.
Okay,
He's-
eunuch is the word that should be used in all cases here.
He's speaking specifically with regard to procreation and sexual desire. They just can't. Either because they were born without the ability, or because they've done it to themselves. And so it's, yeah. No, there are people who may be born that way. But it's definitely not people who are born with a sexual desire for somebody of the same gender. It's people who are born without any sexual desire at all. Kings would often have eunuchs tend to the women in their harems and stuff. And if that was your job, you were neutered so that you didn't, so the king would know that there was no chance of hanky-panky going on there. Yeah, it was this. There simply is no endorsement of homosexual behavior in the scriptures. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. You can reimagine them, and we can all say, what would Jesus do today? And we can. Well, that's valid because, we said it with a lot of other things. What would he do today? But you cannot find a scriptural endorsement of it, and there's almost universally scriptural condemnation of it in the worst sense. It was for Jews an abomination, not just, it was bad. Because sexuality had purposes beyond pleasure. They were tied to procreation a lot.
But if we use, not to be argumentative today, but if we use Jesus' words, a lack of approval of it, or is that the same as condemnation of it? Or, see, that's kind of a bridge to...
And that's interesting because he never mentions it.
Right.
And that's, I suppose you could say it's a loophole. I would say then we should never mention it either. Which wouldn't satisfy everybody.
No, but that's an excellent point.
Would satisfy nobody. It was unmentionable. It was just one of those things. Nobody would have come up to Jesus and said, well, what about these two men who want to be married or sleep together? The question would never have been asked. it just wasn't going to be discussed.
Yeah,
Now, I think some people would like to believe that Jesus would say it's okay, but he never did.
no,
And it was never mentioned. Now, when Paul gets a hold of it,
yeah.
yeah, it's bad, or any of the epistle writers.
Old Testament, Sodom and Gomorrah, the whole.
Yeah, yeah. There's never, you just can't find it. You
No.
can't find an endorsement of it. And
Do you know of any
you
other?
don't even find an understanding of it, really,
No, you're right.
or an
It's
attempt.
certainly not touched.
Well, the idea of sexual orientation was not known. I mean, there was only one orientation, men and
Yeah.
women, just wasn't
Do
known.
you know of any, I've lost the word, any major religion that is not finding it as an abomination?
I don't know. I know
I
Judaism.
didn't know if you read anything
Um.
just in that regard, but if I'm not mistaken, in Muslim, it's dealt with pretty harshly.
Yeah, pretty bad.
Either throw you off a cliff, or you just
I think Buddhist would be the most favorable to it.
toward that.
Yeah, well, yeah,
I was just curious, and,
yeah.
well, it's pretty well, this is what it says. You can find all the reasons why not, and this and that your human mind can come up with. But it depends on what vein you're going down. If you're going down this vein, that's what it says. And then you can have other ideas and opinions, other people. As human beings, we can rationalize the blazes out of anything.
Sure we can. Sure we
And
can.
not just this topic, but it's about anything that's in the Bible
In,
or
in the next section,
religions,
I'll point out.
Okay.
I'll try to illustrate your point that we can rationalize anything, because you're right, and it's not just about sex. The rationalization that we are capable of is about anything, and so we're moving into wealth now,
Okay.
and there are most certainly rationalizations there. Okay. Okay. Well, first we go through the little children were being brought to him in order that he might lay his hands on them and pray. The disciples spoke sternly to those who brought them. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of heaven belongs." He laid his hands on them, and he went on his way. That's very simple. It just means what it says. A bunch of kids. It just wasn't appropriate for a bunch of kids to approach a rabbi, and Jesus says, "No, I like this. I like kids. I think it's cool." Well, that little girl almost did the worship service with me last week. But if there's any place a kid should feel welcome, it should be in church. I know that upsets people. I remember when little Josiah used to run up and down the thing, and a couple of the members got real bent out of shape about it. "Pastor, why don't you do that?" I said, "I'm not here to discipline children. I'm here to preach the gospel. You want to discipline them, you discipline them at home, okay? Not my job." Okay. I mean, yeah, obviously kids can get out of control, and that's just because they're kids. That's what they do. I've been a kid, I know. I'm out of control sometimes when I'm not a kid, But it never bothers me to have kids in the congregation. And what if they're talking? Well, I can talk louder than they can. Although when they start squealing, I hit them high notes. Yeah.
You got a PA system, they don't.
Yeah,
Well,
that's right.
that's right. We'll beat them with technology. Okay, this is what I was referring to, Vic, beginning with verse 16. Someone came to him and said, "Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life?" He said to him, "Why do you ask me about what is good? There is only one who is good. If you wish to enter into life, keep the commandments." And he said to him, "Which ones?" "Which ones?" And Jesus said, "You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother. Also, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The young man said to him, I've kept all these. What do I still lack? Jesus said to him, if you wish to be perfect, go sell your possessions, give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. When the young man heard this word, he went away grieving, for he had many possessions. We'll go all to the end here. Then Jesus said to his disciples, truly I tell you, it will be hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven, of God. When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astounded and said, then who can be saved? But Jesus looked at them and said, for mortals it is impossible, but for God all things are possible. Then Peter said in reply, look, we have left everything and followed you. What then will we have? Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man is seated on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And anyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or fields for my name's sake will receive 100-fold and will inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. So here's the rationalization that I was talking about, Vic. People distort the Jesus out of the gospel, trying to find a way to justify their own wealth. That's greater than any other distortion that occurs, I think. People get rich off the gospel, or they're sitting on a ton of money, they don't do a darn thing to help anybody else, but they're right with Jesus. No, they're not. They're just not, right there. And he talks about that a whole lot more than he talks about sex. Talks about money almost more than anything else. And,
Verse 23, that when the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished, saying, who then can be saved? And Jesus goes on to say, with men this is impossible. It's possible to be perfect, basically. But with God, things are possible. That seems to me a word of grace.
Without a doubt.
a badly needed word of grace.
Yeah.
Because other than that, the fact that I have 2 pairs of eyeglasses, right, makes me rich. And I should have sold them, and I'm guilty because I haven't, so I'm condemned to hell. Right? Yeah, I mean, you can have that.
Relative wealth, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you can go into that tailspin of trying to be so poor that you're pure perfect. Well, that's works righteousness. Right? You can get into that too. So, see how poor I am, I'm honoring God. Well, what does he say when the guy's making himself look terrible when he's fasting? Don't do that, you know. So God's not an idiot, okay? He knows that game. But if I'm trying to tell somebody that my wealth is not a stumbling block to my faith, I'm wrong. It's that way for everybody, all of us. And we all have so much compared to other people. I mean, there's just no way you can, we're all convicted. Like, what does it, St. Paul says, there is none righteous, not one, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, which is why we need grace. But, and I'm going to go off on my familiar rant here, you get a preacher who's doing that stuff, you know, who's rich. That's bad. Because now you're in the Word of God itself.
Well, it's even worse if he's preaching that is our objective in life.
Well, that's what I was talking about.
Really?
Yeah.
Very distorted.
Yeah, it's so, you know, it's good. I'm jealous of them. But boy, If Jesus means what he says, and he does, there's a real bad judgment on somebody who's done that, who presents that prosperity thing as being the gospel. Because they're duping a lot of people. Some people send them their money and they hardly got 2 coins to rub together, you know. But, so I suppose being envious of that is not good either, though. But still, using the gospel to make yourself rich, it's just nuts. It's just nuts. This poor man here, he cannot follow Jesus because he's got many possessions. When Jesus says, follow me, in this context, he means it literally. Join his group. Okay? Not just in the general sense of being a disciple who believes, I want you to come with us. So he's got to leave that stuff behind. So he said, unload it all. This is your new family. This is, you know, we live out of a common box, common money box. He literally followed me. And the guy couldn't do it because he's tied down by what he has, you know. Yeah. As we all are to some extent. Yeah. I feel sorry for him, you know. So there's no justification for wealth, spurious wealth. There's no justification for the forced redistribution of wealth either. So both capitalism and socialism are condemned, I guess it's. I mean, he never tells his disciples, you go and take from that guy and give to the other guy. Robin Hood ain't in there. But Donald Craybill, in that book, The Upside Down Kingdom, he talks about that. He says, you know, we're going to have to face the harsh reality, a real harsh reality. And that is that people who make a lot of money are just going to have to damn well learn how to be generous. That's the only way it's going to work. There's no system of trying to take it from them is going to succeed because you can't outfox wealthy people. You can't. You know, a lot of countries have tried wealth taxes and just the money disappears. It
doesn't disappear, it goes somewhere.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, it goes.
They can't,
It looks like it disappears. You know.
Citizenship changes people.
Oh, everything. They move it to a secure.
offshore accounts, yeah.
That's because the IRS wasn't as powerful back then. Now they're.
No, they still
find it.
can't get
No,
it.
they can't, they couldn't even begin
We know
to handle what's going on.
France tried it for a little while, a wealth tax, and they lost about 30,000 millionaires. They just left the country.
It's okay if you take theirs, but you ain't taking
And
mine.
Obama did something to try to work with banks from other countries. Was it Sweden or Switzerland? I'm not sure which one.
Switzerland.
Switzerland. Well, he was going to get. They were going to report.
Yeah,
Well, he got nothing because it's not in their best interest.
right.
They start telling, you know, their banking industry depends on it.
And those things have been replaced by other, you know, Swiss bank accounts used to be the pristine place for hiding money.
Yes, yes.
Because of their regulations, but now a lot of it is moved to other, like I said, offshore accounts.
There was always somebody who's willing to use your money and keep it under their hat.
Mm-hmm.
You can always find that. So when Jesus teaches about unrighteous mammon, he obliquely refers to that. You're never going to outfox wealthy people because they worship money. They're always going to be 2 steps ahead of you. Yeah. So you can try, but they're always.
He talks at one place about the smarts of the secular people of the world at some place in the gospel.
Yes, the sons of this age. That's the unrighteous mammon parable,
Yeah.
where the guy's cutting back on the master's debt that they owe the master
Mm-hmm.
to make for himself a place to go when he gets kicked out. So that's smart thinking. Yeah,
KG.
cagey. So basically what he's saying is do the best you can in the world that you live in for the sake of those who are needy. Okay? But don't think you're going to get there by outfoxing the rich. You're never gonna do it. You're never gonna do it. The problem is greed. And I wish the church would just say that instead of coming up with all this systemic crap. I wish they would just say greed. We're greedy people. We have to be less greedy. It's the sin of greed. Just say it.
The love of money. Yeah.
The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
Money's the root of all evil.
I think it's a little bit of our Western arrogance. We think we can design something to fix it, when the problem is ourselves.
If this is going to be our last session, could we go to chapter 20 and just look at, starting at verse 20, the mother's request?
Okay.
That's quite interesting.
2020, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's, well, hindsight is 2020. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, no hindsight.
Okay, chapter 20, verse 20. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee. That's who's that?
James and John.
James and John, the disciples, right? Mm-hmm. Came to him with her sons, kneeling for him, asked a favor of him. Said to her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Declare that these two sons," oh boy,
Oh, yeah.
"two sons of mine will sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your kingdom." And Jesus answered, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink?" And they said to him, "We are able. You will indeed drink my cup. But to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant. It is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." Okay, so it's nepotism. That's as simple as that. It's a mother who's just wants to advance her sons.
A little wheel and deal in here. Hey, can you just declare these guys, because they're...
Then of course the other guys are jealous, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not very complicated. That's exactly what it is. Well, remember, Jesus himself gets shoved into the ministry by his own mother. Right? With the wine thing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They have no wine. Leave me alone. It's not my time.
Not my time.
And what does he wind up doing?
Doing it anyway.
He does what she asks. You don't mess with mom, okay?
You stuck with that fourth commandment there, I guess, kind of, huh?
Yeah, yeah. The relationship between his son and his mother in these days was much stronger than any other relationship, even between a son and his father. The relationship between a son and a father was more formal. The relationship between a son and his mother was personal. Probably the most personal relationship, maybe even more than his wife.
It's not surprising maybe that the mother came forward with this request, but it is a little surprising to me that the two boys went along with it, the two men
Yeah.
went along with it.
Well, there is the other passage, and I can't remember where it is, where they're walking along the road and arguing who's the greatest.
I guess that just shows that they were humans, and that's all human nature.
Yes, it is.
And then the other 10 get all bent out of shape.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yep. Jockeying for position in the kingdom of God.
That mother relationship, I think that comes out in the words of Jesus on the cross in the Gospel of John.
That's
A
right.
future concern for...
Gives it to John. Yeah.
Well, it still puzzles me that Jesus had brothers, and they would naturally, I think, be the ones to
Good
whom
thing.
responsibility would be given as opposed to John. Of course, John wrote the Gospel, so...
Maybe he trusted that John would take care of her better.
It's also interesting that he says, "You will indeed drink from my cup." In other words, he's foretelling their pain and suffering.
Yes, yes.
Coming, but not to the
Yeah.
degree that I am going to be, but...
This is not really related, but I can't remember which movie it was. At the foot of the cross, the soldier who says, "Surely he must have been the Son of God. He must be the Son of God." Somebody cast John Wayne in that part. John Wayne, actually. If you which
Oh, he was the
the centurion?
centurion.
Surely it must have been the Son of God. I fell on the floor laughing. It was John Wayne.
I'll be.
Definitely out of character.
Wow.
Did he say pilgrim?
He didn't say pilgrim, although. But I was just laughing so hard. It's like, that's John Wayne. That was earlier in his career, you know,
Sure.
a gig's a gig, right, you know?
And they didn't have cowboy hats back then.
That's right, they didn't have a cowboy. But that's what this is, it's just flat out mother trying to advance their sons and them trying to advance themselves, somewhat. Yeah. Look at all some of the TV guys. Billy Graham, his son, right? And Pat Robertson, his son. You know, that's
Oh, number of them, yeah.
keep the dynasty
I
going.
think Oral Roberts' son too. Didn't he?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen much of him.
No, there's an Oral Roberts University that was established. Thinking that it's some kind of. Yeah.
I know Billy Graham's daughter was trying to get into it too. I haven't seen too much of her, but I think she preaches.
Yeah, she does, I think. On the advertisements for it, right?
Mhm. And Pat Robertson's kid looks just like him. He's a dead ringer, you know. Well, both of those kids are just clones of their fathers, pretty much, you know.
Didn't the one Graham's son kind of rebel there? For a
France.
while?
Oh yeah, he was
And fell kind of away, and then-
he was a partier. Yeah.
That happens a lot to preachers' kids, I guess. Because, tell me
You
about
have, you have no idea. Yes. Keeping it going.
They had to follow so many rules, they thought, or something.
Well, you know, preachers' kids are looked at as they're supposed to be goody two shoes, and so you got to kind of rebel a little extra more to prove that you're not, right?
Yeah, I can relate to
Dave's a PK.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
that. T.O.
What's that?
T.O. Theologian's offspring.
The what?
Theologian's offspring.
Oh, okay.
My kid thinks he believes in Norse gods and stuff like that. I said, sure, buddy.
We slipped down a slope and talked a little bit about gay people, but I thought it was interesting yesterday, this transgender, used to be a man, now a woman, won the weightlifting contest
Oh, he won it?
for the Olympic trials in
He did win? Yeah.
He used to
Won,
compete.
43 years old, big burly son of a gun, but now low testosterone, and so in that country qualifies as a woman, you know? And a lot of people are saying, that doesn't quite seem right to me, you know?
But the woman, in order to stay in the competition, had to lose 40, wasn't it 40
40
pounds?
pounds.
Yeah, how many,
3 weeks or
40 pounds in
something
3
like
weeks or
that.
something, just to stay in.
Oh,
So
really?
she could qualify.
Pushing
She
was
did it,
huge.
But she still didn't win.
Oh. Well, and that, you know, this, particularly in things like track and field sports, it just doesn't seem fair to me, but
She
whatever.
gave it up.
Uh-huh.
She said, I'm not doing it anymore.
No.
There are routinely biological males or genetic males who are transitioning into being females, enter female races and win. In fact, a lot of the young girls that they interview tell you they know who's going to win the race before it
Yeah.
starts. But there's no biological females transitioning into males who ever even enter men's races,
No.
much less win. The
And
science
that's
is
all you need to know.
the science is overwhelming.
Right.
It's overwhelming. So I can't understand why they're allowing it. I just can't understand why they're even
They're
allowing it.
allowing a lot of things.
They're requiring it now. There was that one young lady, I can't remember what country she came from. She was winning a lot of races. And she wasn't transitioning anywhere. But as it turns out, she had internal testicles. She was
Yeah,
kind of a
there
half,
are
hermaphrodite.
some nature in there.
Yeah, and she was just born that way. She was half man, half woman, just born that way. I felt sorry for her, because they disqualified her after they did the testing. It wasn't her fault, but what do you do with something like that? How do you
Yeah.
felt sorry for her? She was racing honestly. She didn't do anything wrong. She just. And there are people who are born as true hermaphrodites.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's just that's just an anomaly in the biology there. But why would you do that? Why if you're a guy, and you, especially like at the high school level or the college level, where some of these, where there are scholarships that are tied into some of these races, okay? Why would you enter a race knowing that you're going to knock some young girl out of there? Why would you do that? Even if you could.
You wouldn't care.
Power.
Why wouldn't you care? I mean, it's like, why would one human being do that to another human being? It just doesn't, you know.
Those that, I think, if that's their express purpose to do that, it amendment probably as far as greed, I want the power, and I'm gonna have it, because the law says it so. But to do it, that's malicious doing.
Yeah, there's an
It's a
ethical.
little different than by coincidence of what happens with each individual person. But why would you do that? I think the answer.
To another human being, yeah.
If I want to win at all costs, so I have my name up there. It has nothing to do with.
But what does the victory mean? It tarnishes,
Yeah, it doesn't mean
it tarnishes
anything
the race
except-
itself.
It's like.
Yeah, but to the person who, you know, you take
They have the trophy.
the trans guy who ends up beating all the girls. I'm the winner.
Well,
Yeah, I have a trophy that means nothing.
it's almost like in any endeavor, I think. If I can be number one, I don't care what I have to do, whether it's in car racing, fist fighting, wrestling, I'm gonna be number one at all costs. And if I can get the advantage over that other guy by whatever means, at my power struggle, I'm gonna win. My name is number one.
You mentioned car
And it's
racing.
gotten
In
over.
some
You're out there
sports,
doing
that's
the
called
dangerous-
cheating, and in others,
Yeah.
like transitioning to be a female, people have said, no, that's okay, you know, fine.
And we're gonna have that worldwide, you know. Good, bad, or indifferent, it's rationalized, whatever you wanna call it, it's
But it's like these
an individual
athletes
situation, and it's,
who have to have a bigger contract than the other quarterback or the other right fielder. And
yeah,
so it's 260 million rather than 250.
right.
Well, when my salary went over 250 million, I was satisfied with it.
Start with.
Yeah, who was it? What did Mahomes get? A 500 million?
What's that?
Yeah.
Mahomes, is he over
Yeah,
500?
Contract.
Yeah.
So
How many?
you buy two
10-year.
10-year?
Ferraris,
Okay.
then what do, you know?
I've heard one.
Well, I guess so. It's like Vic said, it's just, I'm the man, you know.
And
Now,
Well, it's like,
there are others like Albert Pujols who set up a hospital and a clinic for Down syndrome children in St. Louis with his money and supports them.
God bless him.
Yeah. He has a Down's child, and so he knows the importance of that. But
right.
you hear far too little of that. And
Right,
maybe
and
whatever.
see, that's the
you
exception,
saying
I
that's the
think.
first I've heard of it. With
Yeah.
You know, I've heard about Jay Leno's cars, I've heard about such and such's cars and all that stuff. But yeah, that's more, those type of things.
You never hear
They,
good
people
stuff.
don't, they don't make them newsworthy,
No,
and they should be.
should be, absolutely.
I mean, there is, quite frankly, still a lot of good things go on in the world, and it just,
Without a doubt.
it is sickening. And I'll just say, mainstream media ignores it because it doesn't rank
No.
in headlines. So
It's
the
not
mainstream
man,
media is out
it's
there.
not man bites dog, you know, dog bites man is not news, man bites dog, it's gotta be. Now, for St. Louis Cardinal fans, and folks, I guess, around St. Louis are well aware of this, but, you know, he has endowed that forever, basically.
Wow.
Albert Pujols. And you're right, Dave, that should be front page news.
And unfortunately, one way of saying, unfortunately, there is a small group. It's not big news on all the networks. Sometimes it scatters in there by accident almost. Well, he got a $250 million contract, guess what he did with part of it? And that's the last we hear of that story.
Right.
Where those that are living with that they hear more and more about it, as it should be. And as you say, more should hear about it. But hey, today's news could jump tomorrow.
Yeah.
Did anyone hear the interview with Jack Nicholson on the Golf Channel last Sunday?
You're what?
An interview with Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicklaus?
No, Nicholas.
Yeah.
Jack
I was
Nicholson.
never one of his fans, so I don't even remember his name. But I kind of had a change of heart. He has done so much with his money. I mean, not just car dealerships and so forth.
Charitable type stuff.
Yes, and he and his wife are still very involved.
That's
It
wonderful.
was just amazing,
You know, they had a young grandchild die in a swimming pool.
and that's what started it, I think.
Mhm.
God bless him.
Realize that all the money in the world can't control some things.
But I just have a different opinion of him now than I did for a long time.
Rosebud. When you said Jack Nicholson, I was thinking, here's Johnny coming through the.
Johnny!
Didn't seem like that much of a nice guy to me. Well, any questions, comments, tonight, remarks? Nope. Let's conclude with Dear Father.
We'll see you again before Pastor, but from this group, good luck.
All righty. Thank you. I'm jockeying for position in the kingdom of heaven. Our Father, who art in heaven.
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Go in peace and serve the Lord.